everyone, I'm Allie with PotomacBeads.com, and I am coming to you live again from Hagerstown, Maryland this week on Friday. And I am going to be answering some questions that you have submitted, and then if you have additional questions that you would like answered, you can always comment below the video. And when you comment below the video, just have us know exactly what you're referencing, because video and the different comments come in kind of as we're going, and sometimes it's a couple seconds delay. So just if you can give a little bit more detail, sometimes what you're looking for, that would be great. Remember also with this video, if you do have to leave, you don't have the whole hour to watch live. You can go back and watch this later by going to our main PotomacBeads.com Facebook page. And then once you're on that PotomacBeads.com Facebook page, you can look at the videos, and there you'll be able to find them. Also, many of you have asked how you see them after the fact, if you want to go back and reference the videos once they're already done and once they're already completed. You can go back again to that Facebook and go ahead and check that video. You'll be able to see several episodes back of these Q&As if you want to reference that. Also, I've started posting them on our actual YouTube page. That way, those that don't get a chance or aren't on Facebook have an opportunity to watch them as well. Just like we did last week, I'm giving away a gift certificate. This week I am giving away, where did I go with it? A sample pack. So we had many of you earlier this week and late last week checked out our sample packs, which has a little sampling of all of our Potomac Bead Company products, from the Storm Duo to the Ava to the Round Duo, Round Trio, some of our crystals as well, and a sneak peek at some of our newest shape as well, the Ava bead, that will hopefully be here at the very end of August, beginning of September. And the mini Round Duo is in there as well. So if you want to get your hands on one of these sample packs for free, go ahead, give us a little thumbs up, comment on the video, share the video, tell us what you want to know, as well as any questions that you may have, and that will enter you a chance to win the sample pack. Also, keep in mind, we have a lot of individuals that win and then never get back to us with their contact information. So check back to the video a day or so later, and we'll post the winner there as well. So that way, if you are looking to get your hands on a sample pack of Potomac Bead Company products, you can try them all out. Also, this is a good time to touch on the fact that you can search our YouTube videos based on the beads. So if you're looking for something using the Round Duo beads, you can always search on YouTube when you're at our Potomac Beads YouTube. So it's YouTube/Potomac Beads. And when you are below the little banner there, there's a magnifying glass. Use that to search whatever bead you're looking for, and then it'll bring up videos that I've done or some of our contributors have done that use specifically those products. Going along with that, our first question of the day is actually based on a Facebook comment that somebody had made asking about the latest necklace. So I showed you last week, and this is one of the kind of latest necklaces. This is the Laguna Necklace. So it uses the EOS beads, or the IOS, depending on kind of how you pronounce them. They are a parpuka bead that looks a little bit like a brick. I've been doing a series of Better Beater videos, if you haven't checked those out, that have the difference of what beads you can use for spacing and for different patterns. This is a great one that somebody asked, could they use, I think she asked if she could use lentils with this. Yes, you can use different 2-hole beads along the top. So if you haven't checked out those Better Beater episodes on YouTube, go ahead and do that. I touched on this with the different kind of squared shapes. And I'm just going to read off for you. So for the Laguna Necklace, to answer the question, if you have different beads that have 2 holes that lay along the top, these are some of the beads that you can use in the pattern. Keep in mind, you can also hang lots of different stuff down from this necklace. That's why I like this necklace. It's kind of a springboard for all kinds of different creative ideas. And if you're looking to do it, you could use a bar, a super duo, an infinity, half Tila, mini duo, checkmate diamond, a storm duo, a super 8, the EOS beads. So keep in mind the 2-hole lentils. This is a great necklace that you can use up some of those multi-hole beads, hang down a bunch of variety of different things. So check this out also. It's the Laguna Necklace, and answering that question, you can use, yes, you can use many different 2-hole beads. You could even use a 3-hole bead right along the top, but it's a nice, simple kind of right angle weave stitch that you can trade out a lot of different beads for that. So that's answering our first one there. Yes, and there's the Jurassic bracelet too. So hi, Marissa. Marissa's watching. The next question that I am going to go on to is one that we actually were just talking about. So somebody said, and this is from Sincerely Frustrated, was the person that wrote this. It says, "Hi Allie, thanks for the videos. They are very helpful. I have a question. Okay, how do you fix the silver backing on the Rivolis? I have a beautiful necklace that I made with all Swarovski, and the pendant is a volcano color. I have for some reason, the backing for some reason has rubbed off really quickly. Can they be repaired, or what can I do?" So, good question. If you have a Rivoli that you have the different kinds of crystals here, I brought one up. Oh, here we go. If you have a Rivoli that has a silver backing, or here's just one of the rectangles that has a silver backing, sometimes the backing color, even on the Monty, or rather the Chaton, can come off. One of the easiest things to do before that occurs is actually paint the back with like a clear nail polish. There's also a anti-tarnish polish. There is a hypoallergenic polish that you can put on ear wires. It's basically all the same thing. It's just a clear lacquer that can be placed on the back of the crystals. That way the backing of the silver color of some of the Swarovskis does not come off. It's going to depend on how it's sitting on the skin, who's wearing it, what their different body chemistry is. That's the same for all of these coatings. So if you beforehand have the silver backing, say on the Chaton here, and you want to paint that, you can paint that with a clear nail polish. However, what happens if you're wearing it, you didn't do that ahead of time, and like Frustrated, it comes off? My suggestion is going to be to actually get some metallic paint and paint the back of it. You can use metallic nail polish if you have that, but an actual metallic acrylic paint you can paint on the back to salvage that. It may not look the exact same, it's not going to look perfect, but that way you don't have to remake your whole entire piece. When you are doing it also, there is a suggestion that some people do that actually they'll do a bead embroidery style, that they will take the back of the Rivolis, the Chatons, and cover them to kind of make the jewelry last a little bit more with an ultra suede backing or with a bead embroidery backing. That way the backing is really, really protected, and it's not even touching skin, it's not touching anything at all. The other thing that you can keep in mind as you're working with them, you can make a bezel that makes it so that the actual piece itself does not touch any skin. So if you have something that has a silver backing, if you have it sit far enough down in the bezel, or create the bezel around the backing, that way you make it so that the actual silver does not touch your skin, because that's usually what's going to make it happen. Also, I've seen that effect sometimes, that it actually tarnishes a little bit, so keep that in mind as well. Like I had said previously on last week's episode, I think, it is jewelry, so keep in mind that it is glass. Even crystals are leaded glass. Now they're not made with lead. There's a special combination, and that significantly amount has gone down. But when you're talking about crystals, they are glass. That's always a fun debate. Yes, crystals are glass. They are manufactured. When you're talking about Swarovski crystals or any other type of crystal, they're just a leaded glass versus an actual crystal quartz. But keep in mind, they are glass. When you're caring for them, when you're taking care of them, put them in a dry, cool, dark place, and that's going to make them stay a little bit lighter. Another question that we have a lot is, how do you actually clean the crystals themselves? So with many different things, if you have a vintage piece or you have silk cording that is in the actual piece of the crystals, you can use Windex is what I have used on some of the vintage crystals. You can take a little bit of Windex on a polishing cloth, on a nice microfiber cloth, and actually take that to the front of the crystals and around the crystals. It'll make it shine like crazy. If you are looking at vintage crystals, sometimes they will get actually a gunk kind of in the middle depending on what they're strung on. A lot of times you will have to completely restring them in order to clean them correctly, because you can again go through and take them and kind of spray them down with Windex, spray them down with a glass cleaner because they are glass. But when you are looking at it, that might affect the integrity of the cording or the wire that it is sewn on. We've done lots of repairs with different crystals and older costume jewelry, and even crystals that we have ourselves too. So when you are looking at doing those, if you are looking at restringing or repairing or cleaning the crystals, keep in mind you're probably going to have to take them off whatever they're on and restring them. So hopefully that answered the question a little bit. Next time, go ahead and coat the crystal before you lose the silver backing. And if you don't have the opportunity to do that, go ahead and paint the backing with any nail polish or any kind of metallic paint, and that will give it a go. Same, if you are doing that, go ahead and back it again with that clear lacquer, and that will help keep that finish on the back of the Rivoli. So we have a bunch of people watching kind of from all over, so hello to those watching. If you have just joined us, we started about 12 minutes ago, and this is, oh, that's a good one, Christine. I just saw her answer too, or a question. If you are just joining us, this is Allie with PotomacBeads.com, and we are looking to help you today answer some questions that you have submitted and that you have answers that you're looking for. As well, I wanted to just touch on too that we have a pearl auction going on right now. Inside here are 30 plus strands of pearls. So check out our Facebook group to bid on these. I forget what the current bid is, but it is 30 strands of pearls, and check those out while you're looking. Pearls are my favorite. I promise that whoever wins this, I'm gonna do a video with just pearls because I am obsessed with pearls. I have them kind of on always, everywhere. So check out the pearl auction as well. So I'm actually going to go right into this, Christine. Did you happen to bring up Tila? Good job, Anna. Okay. So, Christine, this is actually a great question. Is there a right side and a wrong side to Tilas? So, I'm actually going to do that before so I don't forget. And Anna brought up the Tilas. That was a great, great question. Yes, there is a right side and a wrong side to Tila beads. So, you may not even know there's Tila beads, which is Miyuki's kind of tile or Tila bead. There's also the half Tila, and then there's the quarter Tila as well. You notice the most with the full Tila, and I'll see, I don't know if we're gonna be able to pick it up here online, but there is a flat side and a curved side. So the flat side is actually down against my hand there, if you can see, and then the curved side is facing up. You can see it's a little flatter on the bottom, and then it bumps out just the tiniest bit, almost like a silky, in the middle of the tile, or I'm sorry, the Tila. In the middle of the Tila, it bumps up just the tiniest little bit from where the holes go through. So to answer your question, yes, there is a correct side when working with the Tila beads. When you're working with the check version of it, the tile, there is not a correct size unless you're working with some fancy one that has a table cut, but the Tila beads do have a side. Now, that being said, it's hard to capture on camera here that the bottom that I have facing up is flat, and then the top has that ridge on it. When you're looking at those and you have them strung in jewelry, chances are you're going to be the only one to know whether or not you've used the correct side or the rounded side. When I teach with Tila beads, I usually don't worry about it. I address it and I'll say, yes, there is a flat side and there is a side that has a tiny bit of a ridge. So there is a top and a bottom of the actual Tila bead. However, are you gonna notice? Probably not. If you are a perfectionist and you want to make sure that all of your Tila beads are facing up, go ahead and lay them on your bead mat first and flip them so you make sure that that flat side is facing up. You will see, you'll be able to see kind of a little bit of lines on the outside for the top of the Tila bead. So good question, yes, there is a top and a bottom when you are looking at the Tila beads. So that's one of those fun questions that is a great question to ask, because a lot of people don't realize that the Tila does have a bottom and a top because it's so minimal that you don't actually see it. I'm gonna go to another one of the questions here. Here is some other examples before I scoot over. Here is a railroad Tila bracelet here, and you're really not gonna notice from the front to the back, especially if they're flipped from both sides, when it is flat or not flat on the Tila beads. So they do have a side, but it is minimal, and whether or not you know it what do you know? Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. Another question that I had, and this one I've kind of been dreading because you are going to see me break a bead, but somebody had asked, and this is a great question as well, how do you replace a broken bead on your project? So, number one disclaimer, this is going to be incredibly affected by what your project is. If you have a bracelet where you are using the Tilas, it's a big bead. It's a hard thing that if the Tila bead cracks to replace. If you're doing something like a peyote stitch or a herringbone stitch with a smaller bead, you have the opportunity to actually mask the bead and kind of replace the bead. So, what to do if a bead breaks on your piece. So this is tubular peyote, and it's the tubular peyote with Delicas. It's a piece that we just had laying around here. I'm gonna take my pliers, it's gonna be a sad day, and I'm gonna go in, and I just broke that Delica bead. There is now a gap in that peyote stitch where the bead was. I know everybody's cringing as I just broke that bead. But there is now a hole where that bead was. How am I going to go back and actually replace that bead? If I'm so far in advance that my thread is not going to be really viable to work back into the project, I'm going to start with a new piece of thread. The new piece of thread, I'm going to start further down the project. So I'm going to start a couple rows back from the broken bead, and I'll show you kind of right there is where I'm starting. And what I'm going to do is retrace the line of peyote. So I have the thread end there, and I'm not actually tying it off anywhere, I just have it sticking there. And I'll also do a YouTube video on this as well. But I'm going to retrace back through some of the peyote stitch, just going up and down along the project, making sure that this new piece of thread that I'm using, and I'm using gray thread so you can see it a little bit on the green thread. And I'm going to go up and down the peyote stitch, kind of coming back a little bit of an inch, circling it around, stepping up along the stitch. Now, is there going to be thread exposed? Yes, because you have the thread already there from the beads, and they may have been broken off, but yeah, they're still missing. So you have thread that was already there, and there's going to be no way to magically make the bead cover over that thread. So what I'm going to do is get my thread kind of in position where I'm ready to have my bead that has the peyote stitch there. I'm going to pick up my next, a new Delica bead, and I'm going to sew into the next bead in line just like I was adding peyote stitch. And I know with the live it's a little bit hard to see, that's why I said I'll do a new one. So I have my new bead in there, completely different color that you can see, and it's still not grouped on to the one before it. What you're going to do is basically pretend that the beads that are already on are not on, and you're going to continue to sew in and go through the beads around the peyote stitch, and you're basically restitching a new bead into place. Like I said, there are some times where this will work. There are other times where if you break a bead in the middle of your project, sorry, but you're out of luck. It's time to start the project over. If there was something you really didn't like about the project, guess what? You get to practice more and start over. So here I have that peyote stitch ready to go, and I'm going to grab on to my peyote row. And once I have that then on the top of the peyote row, I'm going to grab in and go through my new bead. I'm going to go back and continue on with the peyote stitch. So you're literally just restitching where you came from. Now, certain stitches, like I said, so there we just added in a new bead, and you really can't even tell I added a new bead in a different color. You can't really see the threads because of the stitch. So that's a nice thing if you do it on a tubular stitch. It usually is harder to see the thread. If you have something again with a bigger bead, you may see the thread if you have something that does break. So certain projects, yes, you will be able to go in, restitch, and then I would continue to stitch up a little bit further and also stitch that bead in one more time. So go up a little bit further, then come back and end somewhere along the bottom here. You can cut off the thread if you do that, and you don't even need to tie it because you've secured it basically about 6 inches or so on both sides of the thread. There was actually an interesting conversation in one of the beading forums about do you knot or don't you knot based on the thread, and how much extra do you weave back in. It's one of those debates like which needles are the best. That is never ending. Everybody has different answers and different opinions for. But can you replace a bead? Yes, you can. Can you make it so that you don't see any extra thread showing? It's hard, but you can kind of pop it in the middle or kind of push it under the new bead, but it is possible to replace beads if you do have one that was broken. I know many of you watching were cringing as I broke off a bead. Little secret, I actually break beads a fair amount if I happen to be working on a short piece. So a lot of times when I do the sample pieces, I will have about 2 inches or 3 inches of the actual bead weaving. I have one sitting here that I do. So I do a shortened version. And if I happen to realize that the spacing is not right, because I know it's not going to turn into anything, I do sometimes just take my flat nose pliers and I kind of turn to the side and I'll snap off a bead so that way I can see what the actual spacing is. However, do you want to do that on jewelry that you actually are keeping that is going to be made? No. What can happen is you are breaking glass. So if I have that bead in here that's already broken, I can go in and kind of fish it out, but you are breaking glass, which can affect the integrity of the thread that you're using. Makes sense. Even if you're using a thermally bonded thread, when you have that thread and if you're breaking a bead, you are breaking glass onto thread. So you risk that you can actually slice the thread with that bead. So do I break beads on my projects? Yes. Do I break them on projects where I'm actually finishing off nice? No. But if I am working out a spacing or a line spacing with it and trying to figure out, do 3 beads work here or 4 beads work here? Sometimes I'm lazy and I will break the bead. However, like I said, I know it's not going to turn into anything. It's just a small sample piece. So we kind of got 2 questions in there as one. Can you add a bead back in if you broke one? Yes, some stitches you can. Some stitches, it's really hard. So if I would break, I'm not going to do this. Don't worry, I'm not breaking this one because it's finished. But if I would break a Tila bead here, it is going to be hard to put a new Tila in there. You can sometimes with super duos, if you realize that, oh no, I have one of these where the hole is blocked, you can sometimes take pliers and actually completely break off that super duo and weave another one back in. It's always better to do so if you just have to do it with one hole rather than going on with 2 holes. Likewise, answering another question that I have, how do you get the hole that is clogged open? So that goes along really well with the piece of adding the bead and goes along well with the clogged holes. There are instances, and it's always going to happen no matter what, there are instances where you will come to a clogged hole. I have one sitting here that I had in preparation for this. So this is a Rizzo bead, and I can tell because I have it on my needle that it actually does have a hole. And a lot of times what happens is while this was getting matted or getting its coating on it, that hole became blocked because the coating blocked the hole. There are instances where you pick up a super duo and there is no hole on the other side. I've had that happen and you think, oh, there's no way to even open this hole because it doesn't exist. However, I would say 99% of the time, it's just a little bit of the coating that's blocking it. I have my needle here, and I would do this with a size 10 needle. I generally don't do this with a 12 because it's too bendy. You can usually take the needle, work at it almost like a reamer, and it's hard to see the little Rizzo, I know. But what I'm going to do is start with the side that is already open. I'm starting with that open side, and then I'm kind of moving my needle back and forth to scrape out that coating that's in there. Generally speaking, after a couple scrapes, that coating comes off and then you have a usable bead and a viable bead to work with. If you have a bead that is being stubborn, don't try to keep pushing it through because chances are you are going to snap or break the bead. The other tool that is amazing, and I didn't think these were that great until I actually tried them, this is the Tulip Fine Beading Awl. Great for doing pearl knotting and also great for getting out the ends there of the actual bead. So if you have another clogged hole, you can take this reamer, and that one went right through. I had a couple here. And you can see it's going right through. I mean, it has a really pointed tip, same deal, it's a little bit stiffer. Don't take it far back on the reamer because then you'll kind of break around the hole and you can break the integrity of it because it is a glass bead. But this little reamer does a wonderful job for cleaning out the holes if you are working with a thinner needle or you're having trouble getting the actual piece that it has. I notice the holes blocked the most, I would say, in probably super duos if I had to pick a bead that they are blocked. But again, if you watch some of our YouTube videos on the actual production of the beads, you will understand why some of them might have a blocked hole when you're thinking about the different coatings, the different processes that it goes through. This one would have been acid wash because it's a matte bead, and as they acid wash it, chances are some of the bead or the coating actually came off in that acid bath, and that's how it got that little bit of coating in it. Sometimes the same thing with travertine coating. You get a little bit of blockage from that travertine coating because it is basically a lacquer that goes over top, and sometimes it will clog the holes. Usually, I would say 9 times out of 10, I'm able to just unblock it with a size 10 beading needle. And then those occasions when I can't, I will go through and do the handy dandy beading all. Little word to the wise, if you're having a project where you have a long go before you come back through a second hole of a bead, say you've got more than 2 inches or 3 inches before you have to come back through the bead, before you even string the bead on, go ahead and check those holes, make sure that they're all open and they're all blocked, or that they all are not blocked rather, so that way as you're going and creating, if you get 6 inches away and then you turn around on a bracelet and come back, and right back at the beginning you have a blocked hole that you can't get out, or that you break while you're doing it, it's incredibly depressing because then you have to take off some of that project. So that's that. All right, next question I have is one that was just posted, and I didn't even see this when I read this. So, what seed bead is close in size to a 2mm round? So that was a good question. So I have the True Trues up here. This is a faceted 2mm round. And the 2mm round is going to be the closest to an 11-0 seed bead. It's going to really be between an 11 and an 8. Some patterns you can go for an 8mm. The 11-0 seed bead I think is 1.8mm. Don't quote me on that, but closer in size is going to be the Toho brand. The Toho is a little bit bigger than the Miyuki. However, the Toho is a little bit more tubular shaped, whereas the actual Miyuki is a little bit more rounded. So many patterns you can take if it's calling for a 2mm, like the Jurassic bracelet that I have here in the middle. If you want to, because of this stitch and this design, you can drop an 8mm or an 8-0 seed bead in the middle there, but you could do the same thing with an 11-0 seed bead. So it's in between an 11 and an 8, but if you're using the Toho brand, the 11 is going to be closer to the 2mm. If you're going with a 2mm round versus a faceted round too, the faceted, because it is cut, is going to appear a little bit smaller. So if you are calling for a faceted 2, I would downgrade to an 11-0 seed bead. If you're calling for a smooth 2, my suggestion would be to actually try to fit in an 8-0 seed bead when you're working with it. So that was another good question. I have another one too here that bounced up, and then I have a couple more that were pre-selected. So, how to protect the color on seed beads. So that is a good question as well. If you have seed beads that have coatings, and Anna did an awesome blog on this, the different coatings and kind of how they stay on, because again, it is, a lot of our beads are glass, and you're coating on the glass, which eventually can kind of wear off or rub off. The protecting on the seed beads, it's actually something that we are working on seeing and testing which lacquers and coatings work the best. The problem is that many of them will affect the integrity of the color that is on the beads. When I'm looking at seed beads and I'm looking at colors, if I know that it's something I'm going to wear a lot, something that's going to be rough, or that is going to be worn near salt water, or that I may be wearing it and hiking, or I don't know, I'm going to look for a bead that is more color fast. I'm going to look for a bead that is actually that color the whole way through and is not a coating on the glass. The other thing that I'll look for is a Duracoat or a perma finish. When you're talking seed beads, there are galvanized beads, which are going to be the gold or silver that are in many of the designs. These beads can be Duracoat or perma finish, or they can be galvanized. Galvanized was the first introduction to the metallic look on the seed beads, and now both the Miyuki brand and the Toho brand have kind of perfected that more, made them longer lasting. So when you're looking at seed beads, if you want to have something that's longer lasting, look for that Duracoat or that perma finish. Yes, you can take your clear nail polish, you can take your lacquer and actually put it over the seed beads. Not a bad idea depending on your work. Some people actually use that. I've seen mentioned a lot that people use floor wax, that they will stiffen projects if they have a medallion or a pendant that actually waves back and forth or is a little bit flimsy at the ends, and you can use that on it, and that will actually help to be color fast as well. However, keep in mind, test a little bit of the product so you make sure that you don't end up with a yellowing or a coloring change on the actual beads. So just like they say when you use carpet cleaner, clean a little bit of space first. Same thing if you're coating beads, coat a little bit first and then go ahead and try. So here's another one. Can you use other beads to work around carrier beads? You can use anything, yay! So we have a carrier bead example here that's been floating around upstairs, I think, since the first Q&A. And this does use the traditional Delicas. Actually, I think it was Bead and Button or Beadwork just had a little things you should know section in their book that did go over the different beads and kind of what the counts are. You can use regular 11-0 seed beads. You can group them together, use 8-0. It's really not going to matter what goes around the carrier beads. All you're doing is creating a little cover to go around. Obviously, the larger beads you use, or if you embellish it at all, that is going to affect how it sits against the carrier bead. With the bigger beads, you're going to run into the potential that it's going to slip off the carrier bead a little bit more easily. And if you're using a cube or a larger bead, you may have trouble making those turns a little bit as you turn around the edges of the carrier beads. So keep that in mind as you use other beads. However, can you use 11-0s or 8-0 seed beads? Sure, you can use any seed beads that you want to do the carrier bead cover. Again, just keep in mind, especially I've seen them with mini duos, that you could do a mini duo carrier cover. Keep in mind those corners, you may want to switch around the corners or the sides of them to actually seed beads, because you do have to get that bend around that shape. In addition to the carrier beads too, we also have some other beads that you can, so here's some jade ones, and you could also keep in mind that you can keep some of the carrier bead exposed. So we have a lot of the carrier beads in fun colors. You could do a center strip and keep them kind of there with a piece. Somebody said double-sided tape is what they use. That's a great idea. Some people will glue them down. Some people just stitch them into the holes that they bring the thread around the sides. But you can always keep it exposed. You could use 11-0 seed beads. You can do a line of 8-0s. I also, Anna brought up some other beads that we actually cover. These are some acrylic beads. And on another little Facebook Live, Bridget and I kind of went over this, that here's acrylic rounds that you can do, beaded balls around. We did Teresa did a video on kind of a beaded bead. Check that out if you haven't. And those have the clear resin that can be inside of them. These are a 10mm. We have them in a couple different sizes. Because they're resin, they're nice and light, and they're not going to affect the weight of the project. And same, we have this fun shaped hexagon and a little wheel here. Same idea, you can cover it, you can coat it with the different size seed beads, whether or not you want an 8-0 or an 11-0. So check that out as well. So the fun thing when you're looking at the different beads to kind of keep them exposed as well is another idea in the carrier bead world. So I had another question from somebody from our Ocean City location that says, would you consider doing a video on wire guards and closures? I'm an intermediate jewelry maker, but would love to see how to properly do closures that would support heavier necklaces. So I went over a little bit last time about the wire guards and kind of the wire guard and why it's shaped the way it is and how you can successfully take the needle up. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, what is the best thread or wire that you would use for a heavier necklace? Would I use a wire guard? How would I attach it to the clasp? What would my suggestion be? So having a heavier necklace up here, I just wanted to show that even though it's a heavier bead to some degree, the amber is light here in the middle, but when you're using beads, you can just, if you're using bead wire, and if it's a heavy bead, I would suggest try to go with 0.024 and 49 strand of bead-alon wire. The number of strands in the wire, so here's 19 strand that I have, that's going to mean that there's 19 pieces of stainless steel that are twisted around one another in order to make the cable. If you're going with a really heavy necklace, a gemstone necklace, try 0.024 and 49 strand. The 49 strand is going to be a little bit more flexible, and that 0.024 is really, really strong. The other thing that you could do is, if you want kind of a nicer drape and a lay, is actually use silk cording. So people out there are saying silk cording with a heavy thing. You want to pre-stretch the silk cording. So this is another question that's kind of springing off of this. This is a size 6 Griffin silk cording. And it comes, if you haven't checked this out, this is my favorite way actually to string gemstones, other than doing some simple wire working like I have here. But this comes with a needle already attached to it. So this is the Griffin silk. This is ideal in my mind for gemstones. I love the drape and the feel of the silk. Yes, it is silk, so versus doing a wire that's going to be a little bit more steadfast, that it's going to hold on a little bit longer. The silk, it's silk, so it may have a little bit of give. But you want to pre-stretch the silk and take the whole thing, off the actual spool. So take the whole piece of silk off the spool, and then you can see, if you Google how to stretch silk cording, it's kind of funny. People use all different things. They hang spoons down, they'll hang hang it around a doorknob, make sure that you're getting it stretched. When I stretch the silk cording, I literally just kind of put it in my hands, put pressure on both directions, and I can tell this one already was pre-stretched. This is one that we probably use for something else. So I'm going to kind of pre-stretch it, and that's going to keep it from actually pulling and having that weight affect how those knots end up. Do you need to knot the silk cord? No, you don't need to knot the silk cord at all. If you are doing a multi-strand necklace with those heavier beads, or you're looking to do the wire covers with the heavier beads, I would suggest that you can use the wire covers. If you are doing something where you're attaching multiple strands even to one hook, say this didn't have the loops on it, you still would want a wire guard for each individual strand. Some things too, sometimes people will use one crimp bead and put 2 strands through it. I tend to make sure that you're only doing 1 strand of beads per crimp tube or per wire guard, because when you get more than that in there, especially if you're using the 0.024 in the wire, you may not have room in the actual wire guard for more than 1 strand. So you may not get more than 1 strand through that actual ending. When you do it though, and you have multiple strands, use a wire guard for each, and you're still going to use your crimp bead after the wire guard. If you want, then you can use a crimp cover, which I showed on the last episode, that kind of fits over the top and looks like a rounded bead. The crimp covers and the crimp beads, again, you can use a crimping pliers. I use a flat nose, and I like the crimp covers because I think it's easier, especially with some of the different wires, that you're not getting that kind of turnover of the crimping pliers where it has the end and then you're turning that over. You're not getting the chance of kind of having that open up as much. So with a heavier necklace, what would I do? I would use wire guards, simply because they look nicer. Make sure that you're using wire guards per 1 strand, that you're not grouping them together. And also try out that thicker wire, that 0.024 wire, and then that will help with the strength of it. A lot of times you don't realize how actually nice the cording is and how strong it is, even for something heavy. This one here is the 0.018, and it's 19 strand. This cord is really, really heavy, really flexible, and really easy to work with. It also has a little thing on the back that says what size crimp beads or crimp tubes to work on and to look at. So check out actually using the beading wire. If you want a little bit of drapage, pre-stretch that silk cording, and that way that'll give you kind of more of a drapage with that. With the silk cording, I still would use the wire guard, or you can use a knot cover too. All right, going in then to the next question on here. So the next question that I have on here is again a coding question that happens to be about the bead coloring. That I have a project that the coloring on some of the beads came off. What do I do since it's now crystal looking? So that question is one that I say, just keep it the way that it is. Now it's a new color if you did have something that came off. If you want to, again, you can take something and actually paint on that, or you can actually pull the project apart. So that's kind of a, what do you do? You have a couple options, just like the backing of that Rivoli crystal. Another question that we had earlier today on our chat, our live chat on our website. If you ever have any questions, when we are able to, we turn on that live chat and you can ask us questions right away about products, about color selection, about different beads and how many, that sort of thing. We can always answer those for you. One of the questions earlier today was the difference between the backing of color and what does it mean when you say Jet Lab or Crystal Lab. So here I have two different beads for you. This is a dragon scale, and you can see that it says Crystal Labrador Fool. This is an O bead, and it says Crystal Labrador Fool. Or I'm sorry, Jet Labrador Fool rather. These look identical. Why they look identical and one says crystal and jet is because they are coated completely over that color bead, or that color glass rather. A lot of times what they put the coatings on when they do these full coatings is going to be determined on what size or what color base they have available. So they may have a bunch of crystal dragon scales already and they need more crystal, or they need more in that full Labrador color. They're going to coat the crystal. Sometimes they have jet available and they're going to coat the jet. Because you're not seeing the glass below, it doesn't matter in the description, and it's not going to make one look brighter or one look darker. The Crystal Lab color is all the same. So that being said, these are full coatings, so they are fully coated. What about when they're not fully coated? Then yes, you're going to see the difference in them. So again, let me pick up here. This is my Jet Full Lab. This is my Jet Lab. So you can see that Labrador coating on half of the actual jet beads. So the base color, when it says black Labrador or jet Labrador or red Labrador even, it means that it has, half that coating of the silver on the actual jet. So that's why you can see it, because it's not a full coating, it's a half coating. When it doesn't say full, then you can assume that it's a half coating like this. So if it says Jet Lab or Jet Labrador, that means that it's half. It's going to say full in the description if it is completely coated. Likewise, the same thing in crystal. So this is going to be Crystal Labrador Full, again in those dragon scale beads. And then this is Crystal Lab in the mini duo. So you can see, and it's a little bit harder with the crystal to see, but you can see through that actual crystal bead, and you can see that half of it is crystal and half of it has that silver coating, versus the Crystal Full, which is going to be completely full. So that's the difference when you're looking at descriptions of products and it says Lab Full. Does it matter if it's jet? Does it matter if it's crystal? No, it doesn't, because you have the entire coating that's going around the bead. Where it is going to matter is if it's Jet Labrador or Crystal Labrador, and that full word is completely taken off. That's when it's going to matter, and you're going to see the difference in the coatings. So that's the difference in the coatings and the covers, is going to be the full versus the not full. Sometimes they will, like I said, just happen to coat it based on whatever they have available. The crystal glass and the jet glass are going to be the least expensive. Ooh, I need some coffee. That is why they get coated a lot, because they're the least expensive glass. It doesn't matter what the color is below, and then you're going to see only the actual coating that's on the top. So another good question as well. Another question that we had earlier this week was how to get Monties to sit correctly. And I thought I brought up my example, but maybe I did not, of the finish. So this is a little preview at one of the designs coming to you, and I must have forgotten to bring it up, but this is a little preview of one of the designs, and this kind of shows you it in process. For working with the Monties, you can see this is the first portion that I did here of this little bracelet design. This was the first go round, and I wasn't going to put a Monty in the top at the beginning of it, but as I progressed, I liked the idea of the Monty in the middle. When working with Monties, Monties have a crossback section. So you might be able to see it there. If not, you can check out my other YouTube video. But the Montes have basically two holes. They have two holes that are intersecting, one going one way, one going the other way. Because of that, when you are kind of pulling them down and spacing, sometimes the thread will kind of shift to one hole rather than the other. As much as possible, when you're going through the Monte, one, you want to make sure to go through both holes. If you don't go through both holes, you actually have the chance that your Monte can flip. So if you're only going through one hole of the Monte, it can actually flip from top to bottom if you're only going through the one hole. When you go through that second cross hole, as much as possible, you want the thread to go through that at that same 90-degree angle. So when I was working here with these drop duos, this original example I had on 10. So think of it almost, it has two holes that are in that cross section, and you have 4 points of entry where your needle can go in. 10 was not very easily divisible by 4. Because of that, I changed the design so that way I made sure that my beads were coming out the exact holes that were on the sides of the Monte. When you try to go through a Monte and you bring your thread through kind of at an angle, what happens is the Monte sits funny. So you want to make sure that when you're going through the Monte, your thread is going through as straight and lateral kind of as possible, that you're going through those backings. That's what's going to bring it down and pull it down along the actual project that you're working on. So if you need to change a count in order to do a bead like that, you can. Honestly, the same thing is going to be true of really any two-hole bead. And this is a little preview of a necklace to come. We've been having fun, Anna and I, with that original Laguna idea and kind of taking all of the different shapes of beads and working with them as well. So Anna's has different beads along the middle and different beads along the top, same exact stitch. Mine have other ones going along the top too. So stay tuned for this video in a couple I think a week or so to come. I have to get it uploaded. But when you're looking at these designs and these beads, how you string through those two holes are going to affect how the beads sit on the top and the bottom. Same thing for the Monte. When you are stringing through a Monte and you have that cross section, when you pull the threads through, if you get them through the holes going straight, it's going to sit much nicer. If you have the holes that you're kind of trying to go through on an angle and the holes are directly in the middle, it's going to pull the Monte to the sides. That's also a lot of times what happens and will actually weaken the integrity of the little prongs that sit in front of the Montes. So I have a fair amount of customers that say, oh, I lost my Monte in the middle. Good thing you can get another one. Just kind of open up the prongs a little bit, shove it in, and close up the prongs. It's actually pretty soft that you can replace the middle of the beads of the Monte. Also, if you have any jewelry that you need to replace a little crystal, a flat-backed crystal, keep in mind that you can take these out. So if we have customers that come that are looking for a bead replacement and a clasp or a different piece of jewelry, try the Montes. If you need something with an actual little V in it, try the cup chain. So if you only need, you know, a 2mm bead or a 3mm bead that has that little V backing, you can actually grab and buy a little piece of cup chain, open up the cup chain and use that. If you grab a Monte, or I'm sorry, if you grab the Monte, then it will get a flat surface on the back that you can glue into. So if you're ever looking to replace little crystals or little gemstones, that's actually a great kind of little trick and tool, is that you can actually open up all these prongs and take that bead out and then put that bead into something else. A lot of times we have it as rings, that people bring in rings and they're missing, you know, one little crystal, and can I find it? Another little fix for that actually is that if you use 15 OC beads, you can pile them together and group them together, put a little E6000, and you can glue them into, generally speaking, different rings. I thought I had one sitting up here. That if you lose a little crystal in or a little diamond in, that you can actually replace that with a little seed bead a lot of times. A little bit of E6000 glue, put it on a needle, and you can do that. But the same thing with the Montes and with the cup chain, you can pull the prongs open and you can actually take them out. If the Monte does fall out here, and actually I'll take it out so you can see that. I'm using my fingernails, you should probably use the pliers. Once you open two, you can generally kind of get it out. And you can then see inside the cross section of the thread too. The thread sits directly behind the crystal, and when you look at the crystal, it is flat on the back. So again, you can glue it to something, and if it does fall out, how do you get it back into there? You can kind of slide it back in on an angle, and then you can take, if you have nylon jaw pliers, even better, you can take your pliers and kind of bend those prongs back in. Try not to do this multiple times because it is going to be metal. So the more you bend it, open and close, the more chances that it can kind of snap off as you're working with it. So those of you, I forgot to touch on this again, we only have a couple minutes left. I have about 9 minutes left. And those of you that are just tuning in, you can always go back and watch this video from the beginning by going to the PotomacBeads.com Facebook page, then go to videos, and you can check out all the different Facebook Live Q&A videos that we've done, and have a whole bunch of different random questions that I get to answer each week. It's fun because I get to research. But if you do want to also, I'm giving away this week a fun Potomac Beads sample pack, so it has all the different beads that we manufacture and that are exclusive to us. Check that out. If you want to give a little thumbs up, share the video, ask a question, that's going to give you a chance to actually win this. If we do have questions that we go overtime with, and we have questions after the video itself, then we go back and I use those as a basis for the start of next week. So keep in mind, you can always go back to the beginning of this after the fact and we publish it, and check that out. Also, you can check out our YouTube page, the YouTube/Potomac Beads, and check that out for past videos as well. So if you want to check the answers that you say, oh, I submitted one, but I completely forgot to watch it, or I have questions, you may be able to go in and find that on the YouTube. Yes, you can also buy the sample packs online. So I had somebody asking that as well. Actually, that was a question earlier this week. Where do you get the where do you get the sample packs? There was a lovely design by Carol Ohl that she had done with some of our newer beads. I know the anticipation is growing with the Eva bead, and we're hoping that they are done production by the end of August, and that we'll be able to launch them in September. The different beads then that are in here too, just to touch on that, the idea with these is that it's pretty neutral color palette. We did 3 different colors, and what that is going to allow you to do is to use these as a base for the different beads and the different bead patterns. And you may have projects where you can do a whole project with these sample packs because it only requires 10 storm duos, or a ring only requires 1 Navette, or obviously you can use the clasps and the closures, 1 10mm crystal. You could have done the earrings that I showed earlier. So there will be some things that you're able to actually make with these, but there's not a project specific for them. So you can check out those sample packs, but they do give you a chance to play with and work with all of our different exclusive beads, getting your hands on them and figuring them out. And I did bring up, and I randomly found as I moved my pack, the example with the Montes too and the drop duos. So this is also going to be coming up. This is something that I worked on and recorded yesterday. So check that out. And get a little sneak peek on some of those drop duo colors that I used as well. So this week, just to touch on it again, we have right now the cabochons that are 20% off. And I know a lot of you have looked at the cabochons. Those 24mm cabs in the Luna cabs should be back in stock shortly. We had a rush on them, which was a great honor to show that people really, really liked the different ottoman designs. This is also showing that if you do want to do something different, this is just one of those resin cabs in the middle. So you can search online for 24mm, and if you put that into a search on our website, it will bring you up things that are 24mm. You can even do 24mm cab, and that'll bring you up things that are cabochons. But this is showing how to use those round duos, and you'd have fun with the sample pack, kind of using the round duos to make the different pendants. That was this one. This one was the ottoman. Next week, I will be traveling. We're doing a fun family road trip and kind of across the country and having fun with kids. So we will be doing the Facebook Live, but we're going to do a shorter version of this for the Q&A. It's not going to be a full hour long because I'm going to have 4 kids with me, and I don't think I can keep them quiet for the actual full hour. So I'm going to do a shortened version of the Q&A, and that will happen for the next 2 weeks. Hopefully the 3rd week we'll be back but if not, it'll happen for the next 3. Still gonna do the Q&A, so if you wanna stay connected with us and stay tuned, still ask those questions below and have the questions there. So another one that just came through was, could you go over how you design your pieces? So sitting in the store, I should kind of lift it up here so that you can see. Sitting in the store, there are so many options down there as I go through there, seeing all the different options. So actually what I like to do and have is the option to have somebody limit what I'm working with. So the number one thing usually that I do is I will pick somebody and I'll say, hey, tell me what to work with. So that's the number one way. Or what product haven't I worked with in a while as I'm making the YouTube video. So when I look at the YouTube videos that I make and manufacture and say, what do I want to use or what do I want to make? The drop duos, I was walking around the store and picked up one bead and thought, I haven't done anything with drop duos in a really long time. I'm going to produce with that. From there, I usually pick 2 beads. So I'll pick 2 styles of beads in addition to my seed beads. I always have little piles of 15s and 11s and 8s on a bead mat. And generally speaking, I have them in metallic colors. That way it doesn't matter what bead I pick up. So you can see I have the gold seed beads here on this little 2-inch sample piece. It doesn't matter which beads I pick up because I have those metallics that are gonna match with everything. Once I have 2 beads in my hand or 2 different styles of beads, then I sit down generally with 1 needle and I sit down with 2 needles. So I'll start with a piece of thread, and this is a good way to keep your ends 24 inches of thread or so. Put a needle on each end of thread, get another piece where it's just 1 needle as well. So I'll start out with a piece about this long, 2 different pieces, one with 2 needles, one with 1 needle. From there, I sit down and I pour out little piles of beads and I kind of go at it. Sometimes I'll have ideas in mind and people will put things out. My husband loves to put out beads and say, oh, do this and these beads go here. And generally speaking, the holes don't line up and he says, figure it out. But I sit down with the beads and I sit down with those 2 pieces of thread and I will pick up and do the same thing with the right and the needle. Almost always I start with 2 threads and then I figure out what is the easiest way to actually teach it. When I figure out the easiest way to teach the design, and like I said earlier, sometimes that requires actually breaking off a bead in the middle of the design because I realize that I need a little bit less space or a little bit more space. I'll kind of lack the thread a little bit. But generally speaking, within about 3 inches, I will know whether or not it's a viable design. And then from there, I'll pick colors that I really, really like, or I'll change to a different type of bead that may sit better or may work better, or throw in another bead. I find that starting with, especially if you're new to beading or you haven't really done your own designing, if you start out with 2 needles, it's much easier and seems like it goes it helps the mind kind of at ease that you're not stressing about trying to design something. Pick up a multi-hold bead, add some seed beads, and then see where you go. Anything you do with your right needle, you can also do with the left needle and work that back and forth in the design. From there then, come back down with those beads, see what you're at. But I don't commit to a whole bracelet until I have about 3 inches and I know that the design is viable. Also, it takes about 3 inches to see correct curvature and see how it's going to lay. If I want it to turn for a necklace or have drapeage, or if I want it to be straight, I usually know that within about 3 inches. So if I'm not limiting my beads, I have somebody else limit my beads and say to my daughter, go in and pick 2 beads for me to use to do this video. From there, I limit what I'm holding on to, and that makes it easier than looking at this vast mass collection of beads and deciding that it's kind of overwhelming, because it can be overwhelming. So I like to take just a couple beads and work with them. And again, I always have those seed beads available. I tend to pick up 15-0s fastest, and I design a lot with the 15s. And then I realize if I have a number of 15s on, how can I decrease that by increasing the size of seed beads? So 15s are easy because you can really work in the space and decide on the spacing. But then I switch a lot of times to a larger bead. So if I start out in this case here with 4 15s, I know then that's the space that I have, is that space for the 4 15s. So instead, if I want to, I can actually add 3 11s because I know that conversion of the 3s versus the 4s. We have reached 2 o'clock already, so I kind of have to cut off there. We've answered so much today based on finishes and base colors and keeping the back of Rivolis and how to work with Montes and working around carrier beads and heavier beads and fixing beads with that peyote and trying to get that extra bead in there that broke. So I thank you guys for joining. Again, give a little thumbs up, share, comment if you want a chance to win that sample pack, and we'll announce the winner in about the next 12 hours. That way it gives people a chance to watch that have to work or are on a different time zone as well. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have fun enjoying this awesome community that we have had the honor of helping create. Join our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making and get inspiration and amazing design ideas from others there. And also, if you get a chance to, you can check out our website, PotomacBeads.com, and check out the deals that we have going on right now, like the cabochons at 20% off. And also, if you want to, remember that we have the auction going on, and you can bid on these 30 beautiful strands of pearls and win those as well. Have a great weekend. Enjoy hopefully nicer weather. I will be in a car for 2 days with 4 children and a 5th children, which is kind of like my husband on the side there as well. And we'll be traveling kind of further west. So I'm going to have a fun 2 days of that and have lots of projects and things for the kids to work on, and I'll be beading along as I go. So stay tuned with us next week. I'll announce the time because I'm going to be in a different time zone. Going to shoot for 1 o'clock EST for next Friday. Submit your questions ahead of time, and I'll let you know exactly in the middle of the week where we are and what time, and we'll do a little shortened Q&A next week as well. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and have a great weekend and enjoy the weather. Get outside and also make time for beading.